pessimistic side is basically, do we do something collectively before we can't anymore? People can be bothered or too pessimistic or too cynical. They're like, oh, you can't do anything. It's like either growth is impossible, institutional change is impossible, growth is possible, but it will always be bad. And the optimism is like the flip side of this, is that people are so cynical that there are just like $100 bills lying on the ground everywhere. There's so much that can be done, and there is so little that is needed, to flip the balance. If we actually try to do things, whether it is institutional design, whether it is civic engagement, I think there's just so much to do. We have the internet, we have computers, we have educated people, we have AI, there's just infinite possibilities.
Welcome to the LFG Podcast. We're joined today by Gabe.
Thanks for having me here, James.
No, thank you so much for coming. Gabe, so if people don't know, you're the CTO of Conjecture and advisor to ControlAI. You've been around the AI safety space for a number of years. You're really interested, obviously, in the trajectory of AI, transformational technology, big risks. How do we control those risks? Institutional reform, which we're going to cover all today. It'd be great to just kind of get an open-ended, what is your background? What's led you to Conjecture and AI safety movement?
Yeah, sure. So my background is a bit unrelated to AI, or not that unrelated. I got into theoretical computer science in uni. Studied, formal methods, formal verification, this type of stuff. Then I applied this to blockchain soon after uni. More the infrastructure layer of blockchains, more than the applications and things like this. It was quite technical, like consensus algorithms, this type of stuff. It was quite nice. I just wanted to make a lot of money building technical stuff, and it was a nice place to do so. Then in 2020, there was the release of GPT-3, which came much earlier than I expected. I didn't expect that we'd have AI systems that potent that soon. And this is what steered my trajectory toward AI. Before that, I was, a nerdy teenager, very early, on computers, playing video games, wanting to program my own, this type of stuff. Like a lot of other very nerdy teenagers, we were talking about AI, AGI, this type of stuff. But when we were talking about it, it was more like sci-fi, the type of stuff that you expect 100 years from now, and so on and so forth. And even back then, I was thinking about societal scale risks, global risks. So I was quite interested / worried, into nuclear wars, nuclear weapons, biotech, this type of stuff. I didn't care much for nanotech. Same as AI, it registered as sci-fi. I was more interested in concrete risks that we were facing. And I mostly saw AI as a long-term concern, something that accelerates technological development. And so I was like, yeah, with AI, you get the risk of developing the type of technology that we don't know how to handle earlier. But it was like all long-term. But with GPT-3 in 2020, like all of my timelines compressed.
And what was it about GPT-3?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Basically, when we were a teenager, all the rage was on two different approaches to AI. So on one hand, you had what we call like GoFi approaches, good old-fashioned AI. So it's more discrete systems, logical-based systems, binary systems, and things like this. So those things don't handle language gracefully. You can hard code a grammar, and if the sentence that you type fits the grammar, it works kind of well, but else you're on your own. And on the other hand, you had statistical method. And on my late teenagerhood, you had, what is now known as deep learning and so on and so forth. And it was hard to imagine that you would have a system that could do both. It was like, this is the hard nut to crack. It's like, can you have a system that can both think logically and think, more intuitively through language, this type of stuff? And basically, we're like, oh, this will take, so many insights. This will take so much time to come. And this was the opinion, of most AI researchers. And then in 2020, we have GPT-3. So you have a system that can reason in words, that can reason about math, that can do all this type of stuff. Some of these, it did, badly, but it did them at all.
Yeah.
And it's what we expected to have much later in the future. It was the things that the artifact that we thought was sci-fi, we actually got it in 2020.
What factors do you think led to that happening in 2020? Why was it so quick? What were there any things that happened at the same time that meant that it came in 2020?
This is. It may not look like it, but this is a very deep question.
Oh.
It's like, why did
2 minutes?
You see what I mean? It's like, why did some technological thing happen at one specific time? Is like, wow. The true answer is the entire history of everything and a bunch of things that we don't know. Like, we actually still don't know why neural networks work that well. So before 2020, in 2015, it wasn't clear that we will have, neural networks that work with text, that just from text can derive world models and things like this. It was clear to no one. And right now, we live in that world. So we see them, so we can, make post hoc rationalizations. Hindsight is 2020, blah, 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 blah. Hindsight is 2020, blah, blah, blah. But the true answer is we don't really know. It just happened.
There are a bunch of big bets, right? You had OpenAI, obviously, in 2015. Google DeepMind before that, obviously, had AlphaGo and kind of breakthroughs. You had the Transformer, which obviously the big architectural change. But I think it's really good point. Like when you have that moment, and a lot of people would have had it with ChatGPT, right? I remember when I first logged into ChatGPT, and the jump I often think about is like the last time I used a chatbot, which wasn't some kind of like terrible website chatbot, like to help you with customer service. Like a real kind of conversational chatbot was when you had that like talk to Jesus chatbot. And it was terrible, and like you could crash it in 5 conversations. You never saw that?
No, never heard of this.
Oh yeah, it was like OG time of how do we? I don't know if it was AI or like backhoe, whatever. But anyway, you had that, and then next thing you know, you're talking to ChatGPT, and that's like, what? This thing is just like a completely different beast.
Yeah.
And how do you reflect on like that now? Because a lot of obviously what you're talking about now is okay, AI. Where is it heading? What are the risks, etc. But how do you see like the intervening period between you seeing ChatGPT 3 and then being like, okay, I need to stop doing what I'm doing? You were in companies, weren't you? You were working on companies, doing some startups, and being like, I need to start pivoting my focus towards this risk. Like, what was the okay? That's quite a big trigger, right? To change from just this is an impressive system to I need to fundamentally change my approach to life.
Oh no.
Get deep.
So I like deep topic, but as a person, I'm not that deep personally.
Did you? I guess one other angle is like, did you feel that confidence in the ecosystem as a whole? Like, did you think there was enough work being done? Obviously, there was work being done to build the systems. Did you feel like there was enough work being done on the other side, which is okay? How do we defend against the risks?
So I don't know. The way I think about it is, let's say you're an expert in nuclear physics, and you see that there is a big breakthrough where if you extrapolate from that breakthrough, you expect that there is a nuclear bomb big enough to just blow up the entire Earth in 10 years, and that it's very hard to neutralize. It's very hard to build defense against that. It's just a bomb that blows up the entire Earth. I'm like, that's basically the position in which I found myself. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I could bet that in 10 years we'll build, defenses that are good enough. And it's like, right now I have no reason to expect that. We can get into it later if you're interested. I can try to trust the current international order, lol.
What do you mean? You can't trust the international system?
I can try to trust the current, individual institutions of individual countries. Lol again. So it was more like, given this, it's quite obvious that I must do something. Then there's the other part of your question, which is why from looking at GPT-3, I'm like, yes, we're getting to, super powerful AI systems, AGI, ASI, however you want to call it, in like 10 years. And my answer to that one is something like, when you think about the missing components for ASI, AGI, and things like this, when you talk about people, when you talk to AI researchers and you ask them, actually, give me a model of what you think is needed before we have super intelligent AI systems. Give me a model of what you think is needed before we have general intelligence systems. And you try to operationalize it in any concrete way. Then basically GPT-3 already had the core capability. Then, we've made more reliable system. We've built scaffolding on top of them. We built agents. We built things that can crawl the internet and things like this. But most of these are scaffolding on top of the core. Like a thing that can learn about the world from just a lot of data and that can, reason in novel ways from this. Once we had this, then most of the last years are not that surprising. A bunch of people got surprised by agents or Claude Code and things like this, and now mostly expected. Same thing with ChatGPT. I don't know if you remember or if you were there before ChatGPT, but we didn't have a chat interface. It was mostly a completion engine, same as the text that you had, the autocomplete that you had on your phone. You type up a couple of words and it predicts the next word. This is how it worked before ChatGPT. But already there, you could see that you could prompt it with some special conversations, and then it would act already like a chat agent.
Yeah.
So it already had the core.
Yeah. A lot of that breakthrough was just for UI improvement. Well, at least made it
and the
open
fine tuning
to
and the fine tuning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like RLHF was a big thing.
No, it's really interesting. And you're obviously now kind of focusing on this next stage of regulation of AI. And if you go to, you've written a lot about this topic. I think the 3 doctrines of a future of AI.
Yeah.
Could you just outline what that is, what your conclusions were in the piece?
Yeah, I think this was written 6 to 12 months ago, also known as a lifetime ago. So I'll try to remember. In the 3 doctrines, I think I outlined 3 doctrines. Surprising. The first one is the doctrine that I subscribe to, which is basically the extinction doctrine. The point of the extinction doctrine is that if you build AI systems that are more powerful than humanity combined, that have more agency than any current government, any NatSec apparatus and things like this, it ends very badly for humans. That's the first doctrine. The second doctrine is that if you have AI systems that are more powerful than humanity combined, more powerful than governments and so on and so forth, what you end up is with a decisive strategic advantage. So basically something that lets you be the king of the world. And this is the theory, the scenario that a lot of people are acting upon. Basically from this doctrine, the only reason why we may end with the extinction of humanity is that the bad person ends up with ASI. But if the good person ends up with ASI, then it's, massive utopia, everything goes well, we have nothing to solve, just ask the AI, solve humanity for me, and it does it. So that's the second doctrine. And the third doctrine is even more alien to me, so it's hard to represent it in a fair way. But it's a mix of 2 things. One is it's impossible for AI to become more powerful than humanity combined for some reason, either technological, like the technology is impossible, AI plateaus and it stops getting better, something like this. The other one may be social. It's okay, we have better AIs, but we can use those better AIs against AIs. And so humanity then has those AIs. And at no point do AI systems become more powerful than humanity combined.
Is there an adoption element to that, and how vastly it's adopted?
For this one, yes.
Yeah.
For the first 2, it doesn't really matter, but for this one, yes. The first 2 assume that the first one assumes that humans are never in control. That's why we end up with extinction. Is that AI evolve in a direction that we are fully out of. We're not part of this direction. We're not part of the loop. And if you think of ants versus new constructions, new development, it may end, with a garden with the ants flourishing, but usually they just get bulldozered.
Well, you're starting to see this in reflected in the arts as well. Apple TV released it's their Pluribus, which I think kind of takes on that concept. I don't know if you've seen or heard of it or not, but basically it's just kind of this infection that comes from, I think, sound waves elsewhere, but it effectively makes the human population act as one. So it's one brave. So all of their cumulative...
a hive mind.
Yeah, a hive mind, literally. And you're starting to see, I don't know, I think it's that kind of existentialism with AI is reflected in the arts now.
Yeah, because there's a lot of work where it's we would dive in, especially the third one. I'm really keen to get your perspectives on the third one. Because I know that's one, for instance, a lot of people actually have the most sympathy with. People who disagree a lot on the kind of extinction element will say the third reason, it's a technological barrier. But one would be great to get your take on is a lot of people may envisage AGI, ASI, and one of the reasons that this isn't a threat, can't imagine it, is because you have this vision of this single entity, this single thing, system, rather than the idea of a collection of systems. The idea of you've got multiple agents working together, and it's a for kind of intents purposes, for maybe bad description, like a hive mind scenario.
I don't really think it needs to be a hive mind. What I mean by this is that, no single human knows how to build a rocket to the moon. And yet collectively we can do so without being a hive mind. So I think the intricacies of how agents coordinate and things like this are kind of beside the point. I don't think we have a good enough science of, coordination, group agency, group intelligence, and things like this to speak about those things in grounded ways. So it's like when people say, oh, it's going to be a single ASI, it's going to be a hive mind, or it's going to be a collection of agents. I'm like, this is way past what we can discuss in concrete, grounded ways. So I'm like, this one is less interesting to me.
Does it not matter, though, in terms of like your solution to a problem? Because if you imagine the system is a single system in itself, you would require the infrastructure, the data centers to power that, to train that, rather than a collection of individual agents. You would need a potentially lower level. Does that play into it at all, or is it just like that's in your mind, that's like a level of, once we're already at that kind of point, that it is kind of a moot angle?
I think it's quite confused. We can get into it. It's just it's more technical detail than I expected and than I think you may want, but it's okay. Let's get into it. Right now we have many different regimes. AI is actually complex, not hard to understand. It's just complex. There are just many things. So for instance, we have pre-training, where pre-training is just a phase where you give it a lot of unlabeled data, but quite filtered and things like this, and it learns the patterns in this data. And it can already start doing the autocomplete thing. Then you have a phase of, let's say, chat fine-tuning, agentic fine-tuning, tool-using fine-tuning, where it's not yet necessary at the personality level, but you just want to have it learn how to interact like an agent. Then different people do different things. Some people will do specific fine-tuning for the type of agent personality that they want. Some will do RLAI, so a type of fine-tuning where you also have AI in the loop, looking, like evaluating the quality of the answers and things like this. Then once you have this, you have scaffolding. So scaffolding is a bunch of stuff that you do on top of the systems, like, the prompts, the UI, the tools that the system has access to, whether it is through MCP or through other things. And then there's the way the user will use it, and the environment. So for instance, if you use, Cursor or Cloud Code and things like this, the agents.md file, your file system, the code that is already there. So for instance, if you put an AI in a well-structured code base, it will be better than in a badly structured code base. So all of these things matter. And where you draw agency or where you draw identity is like more of a spiritual question. For instance, you deploy 50 agents and they start with the same weights and they start with the same, file system. But because of their prompts, they will look at different files. And so they will have different contexts in mind. It will also change their personality as an agent. The more you talk to them, the more they will act as the agent within it. So for instance, in a chat, it may be convinced that you're, super stupid because you don't understand the thing it says. And so for the rest of the chat, it will consider you're stupid. In another chat, it will have made a mistake. You will have pointed it out. It will be super apologetic and deferring to you. It's like, are these two different agents? Is it the same system? Do you put the difference in the chat or in the weight or in the pre-training? It's like,
yeah. No, I see what you mean. I guess when I'm focusing on the agents, I'm thinking of like the extra capability you get, the extra I guess the element of the agents as the collective, the fact that you can specify individual goals, you can specify down to the point of like you can train individual models for doing different tasks, fine-tuning them in different ways, that kind of collective intelligence. But I take a point of like ultimately you get to the original base model, and there's like a question of when does it splinter off, when does it fork, does it really matter?
And if someone does a system where the agents can be fine-tuned in real time, is it that different from a system where you can load examples in real time and context in real time and so on? Like,
that's not the thing you can focus on. Let's dive into the third one, because I think that's the area which like a lot of people will have criticisms on or different positions on, which is the idea of no technical barrier to creating some sort of super intelligent system. And your view is like, that seems most alien to you. Like, why couldn't we break that? I guess one element like people frame it under is timelines. which feels like, okay, you might be arguing over how many years, which feels a little bit kind of,
Yeah.
okay, that kind of
If
matters.
someone is like,
kind
it's
of
possible in 1,000 years, then like, yeah, then it's a question of timeline. Sure.
Yeah. But you take issue with the idea that it's a tool and kind of impossible.
I mean, even 1,000 years seems like ludicrous to me, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, why do you think it isn't impossible? Why do you think that? If someone was sitting here who was like, I don't think we could ever achieve an AI system which could compete with all of humanity in terms of intelligence.
Yeah, so I think this one is like fairly straightforward, actually. I think it's mostly a matter of operationalization. So what I have found is that if you get into operationalizations, it's like quite obvious. And so then the debate becomes, do you accept to go into operationalizations or no? So for instance, let's take chess. I think we already have AI systems that can beat all of humanity at chess. So on the principle, what makes chess different from something else? Let's say we take, super persuasion. I think we already have AI systems that can persuade a fair amount of people. And then the question is, what is the threshold that you care about? Do you think it's like 5% of people, 10%, 20, 50, 70, 80, 90, 95, 99? And do you see any plateau here, any reason not to expect this? And like once the system understands, language and human psychology, and it's mostly a matter of getting better at it. If you think, about military strategy, it's the same. If you think about controlling other systems, before people were like, oh, it's only a stochastic parrot. It's only text or something like this. But now they can control tool. There was, it's been since ChatGPT, ChatGPT with search already interacts with the internet. Now we have things that interact, with vending machines, with Pokemon, the game. We're now, putting them in robots, with VLMs, like visual language models and things like this. It can just control, various things. And can it do it better than people? Well, now we have, robots that do backflips. I think it already trounces most of humanity. Most of humanity doesn't do backflips.
Speak for yourself. I'm very good at that.
Yeah. It's okay. I can do a backflip, or possibly I can, but I wouldn't dare. But so my question is like, at which task do you think it doesn't get better than people? And from my point of view, once I've seen GPT-3, I was like, yeah, now it's mostly a matter of waiting until it beats people at most tasks. And so far, time is proving me right. A bunch of people are like, oh, it cannot understand things, it cannot come up with novel solutions, and now it comes up with novel solutions to mathematical problems. So I think if you get down to actual concrete predictions, then it becomes much easier. And basically, time shows that, nope, AI do beat people. And, I'm interested in people betting against that. I think it fails.
You've talked a lot about kind of like the existential stuff in AI but I tend to think that the most, or the way that the majority of the population interact with AI and have existential feelings about it is through social media. And I think majority, like in the Western world and possibly elsewhere as well, a lot of people are having a debate about where the regulation should come into effect in regards to social media. I was just wondering if you have any takes on that.
I think the baseline is already that we've given up largely on social media regulation. So social media is the novel form of media. It mostly replaced the rest. The rest, to the extent that it still exists, discusses a lot what is on social media. The bad journalist article is like, oh, there was this thing discussed on Twitter. It's like, ah. So historically, we've had newspapers. States paid a lot of attention to newspapers, regulated them a lot, tried to avoid, foreign propaganda in newspapers, this type of stuff. Then we had radio channels, then we had TV stations, same things, and so on and so forth. And with social media, we've just basically surrendered.
But so social media is an interesting one, right? Because there's a lot of like piecemeal regulation going in now. You've got online safety acts. You obviously have the recent thing with Grok AI, and now a reaction to how to prevent that. You've got endless discussions about like what to do in schools and children. Do we do 16, like under 16s get banned from social media? And
I guess especially with the effect of the algorithm, and if when AI will presumably learn what's the most interactive for people, and then you get a loop of that.
And I was in a call with someone today who was saying like we should just ban AI use for people under 16. Obviously, what I mean is like chatbots, because AI is everywhere.
Software was called AI.
Yeah,
All of
exactly.
software was called.
I mean, So there's
and it's a take. You could say children must be prevented from using software, but what a take.
that'd be novel. It's a case of like taking a charitable view. Obviously, we're talking about like we don't want to be utilizing things like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., etc. But like the big risk here, right, is okay. Let's take this. To take the charitable view of okay, there's a threat to humanity. Let's leave timelines out of it, but let's say it's within a reasonable decade or so, as just an easy kind of point to use as a reference. And therefore, the need for regulation is here. There needs to be a way of like course correcting. Governments need to be thinking about this. The history of governments getting regulation right, especially in like the tech sector, is not great. And you can point towards the EU, obviously the recent EU Act that was held as a big success, and now they've just like by many people in the kind of safety space, it was like, oh great, we've done this, and it's had let's say an interesting 18 months, and they're rolling back on a bunch of the implementations or the language, or trying to halt things, or even thinking about repealing parts. So how do you think we get that right? Like fundamentally, how do we navigate this scenario where we don't just fall foul of the same issues that before?
I think there are many different things here. The first one is that usually I'm quite against piecemeal regulation. I think this is quite a bad way to do regulation. I think the idea that governments goes into each industry, into each sub-industry, and says X is allowed, Y is not allowed, and does basically micromanagement is not really feasible. I don't think it's like impossible or morally bad or whatever. I just think it requires a level of institutional competency that is like far beyond what we have right now. Like to trust the government to do this well. It's not only, so first the design of such laws is like very complex because you must have a lot of domain expertise. The more specific you go, the more domain expertise you must have. And if the domain changes quickly, you must maintain those changes such that they're still up to date. And this never happens. So first is the thing of piecemeal regulation that I think is not good, given this. If someone tomorrow said, we want piecemeal regulation, but we'll build, institutional capacity to actually support this, sustain it, and we think that, the benefits are worth the cost, some type of rational analysis, I could hear it. That's not what I see right now. So that's one thing. The other one is reactionary regulation. So the one on deepfakes is quite telling. We've been, including at ControlAI, we've been talking about deepfakes like 2 years ago already. Deepfakes, there are now, open source deepfakes generators. People have been using Grok to do deepfakes for a while. Just now, there was the thing with the bikinis, and it became a meme. And so now people are reacting to that. And so this type of reactionary regulation that is just as a result of people complaining and doing a big, a lot of noise during a very punctual amount of time is, I don't think, a good way to govern. I think government by crisis is bad. So,
that's it's a real structural problem, right? Because as you say, deepfakes have been on the radar for ages. You've had the Online Safety Act didn't properly cover use of sexual deepfakes, sexual harassment, fraud. It's still an issue that hasn't been covered.
Yeah.
And exactly as you say, it was caught in this kind of meme of people creating these images on Grok. They've been able to do a bunch of similar stuff for ages, but it's just never hit this point of being palpable enough in the political sphere or the public sphere. Like that, the system is just so heavily incentivized the wrong way. So how do you balance that from your angle of like campaigning of we need AI regulation into such a system where it's just set up to be reactive and to create piecemeal regulation? Like how do you kind of balance that?
So the thing is that that's not our experience with ControlAI. We haven't found the system to be set up to do anything. We have found a lot of people who told us this. They're like, oh, but you don't understand the system, Overton window, blah, blah, blah. You cannot talk to politicians and talk about extinction risks. They're too stupid, they're too uneducated, they will never get it, and so on and so forth. And this has not been our experience. What we found is that we literally cold-mailed, I think, every MP and Lord. A bunch of them were interested in briefings. We briefed them. Even the ones who disagreed or were not interested were, I will say almost everyone, but I don't have a precise recollection of someone not being part of this, but were cordial, were interested, asked nice questions from their point of view, and so on and so forth. So this has not been our experience. We've briefed, I think, more, possibly around 200 representatives right now. We had more than 100 support our campaign. So
can you talk about anything about in general about what their reactions were to
very varied. We have bipartisan support for our campaign, both on the left, on the right, on independents and things like this. So you can imagine that there are many different reactions. Some were already quite anti-AI. It's like their anti-AI-ness transferred to concern about extinction risks. Some are pro-growth. And so you'd expect that they are, super pro-AI and wouldn't care, and they cared. Conversely, you had some anti-AI that were against caring for extinction risk because they were like it distracts from the real problem from their point of view. So you have a bit of everything. You also had, obviously pro-growth ones they are like, oh no, any regulation will slow down things, so we should never consider regulations. But even then, it was not in those words. I'm just, making clusters, and when you make clusters, you lose, all of human.
Did you have any talk about the potential of if this technology kind of doesn't pan out and the presence of potentially being a bubble?
So this is a very recent talking point. So I don't remember if we've had this. So I mostly read the reports from people talking to politicians and then give advice and things like this. I'm an advisor. So when I talk to politicians, it's usually on punctual stuff. It's not part of ControlAI's regular activities. If I have to guess, yes, there are some that are raising those concerns now. Just because, politicians listen to things that happen. They are informed. And so they are informed about people saying this, so they will reflect the concerns of their constituents. And if their constituents think it's a bubble, or if they think their constituents think it's a bubble, they will echo this. But yeah, in practice, I think the system, at least in the UK, is quite open. You can just go talk to representatives and brief them and have them take a position. You can listen to them. They will give you actual counter-arguments. So I actually disagree that the system incentivizes this. I just think it's a lot of people are short-sighted and will just do stupid things because they don't want to do the proper thing.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is though is like when it comes to actual action, like when it comes into writing the law and putting it into place, that's when you're going to face the real trade-offs and the politicians who are going to have to navigate that. And that's when you get the whittling down of the piecemeal, because you get the elements of, I don't want to go too far on X yet, or I don't want to do this because of the trade-off I got to make here.
Then it might be a question of mindset. I believe this is very reasonable. Like if I'm a politician and I'm only 5% convinced of this, I will not make it, my main thing and sacrifice all my other concerns on the altar of, extinction risks. So I think here there's a job of actually convincing politicians of the risks. And I think once you're convinced of the risk, you're like, yes, it's important. And indeed, when I do my trade-offs, when I do my calculations, I should actually do this. I think there's also another thing where politicians, to a large extent, are representatives. And so they must represent, at least in the legislature, they should represent the concern of their constituents. If they don't, they also don't get reelected. So it's like also incentivized to be that way. So if people do not care about it, it's also fair for them to not care about it. So there's, how do you call this? Like a two-pronged approach where you must both convince politicians and people. The goal is not to bypass democratic consent. I think the system actually incentivizes this. I just think that a lot of people are looking for shortcuts. Like instead of convincing people of the problems, instead of convincing politicians of the problem, they want to bypass all of that.
Yeah, you want to try and slip it through.
And I think this makes everything worse for everyone. They want to, to do screaming matches and be the one that screams the loudest.
And just like, because you're we haven't gone into it too much yet. We you definitely should talk about it more in terms of like, you're very aligned in terms of like wanting the UK to succeed, wanting growth. The West, we need to economic growth, but also just improving our institutions, etc.
Everything.
And the struggle a lot of people have, right, is you think from the UK side, we haven't made the best choices in a number of areas. You can't really build anything. You can't really starting new industries is quite challenging. There's a lot of regulation covering a lot of actions people want to do. And there's a pocket of AI which is racing ahead of the US and China, etc. Countries are trying to capture the market, build these new tools. And a lot of people have an adverse reaction to, oh, here we go, trying to slow it down, punish the UK again, for no real gain, because we don't have many of the top frontier models. What do you see what is your kind of counter to that, and what do you see UK's role being in that kind of global ecosystem?
As always, several points. I think the first one is, I wouldn't put extinction risks in the same category as most regular industry risks. For me, it's more a matter of national security. It's like nuclear weapons. You don't think of it as, regulating cars. No, so from a point of view, it's more matter of national security, security of the international order, international security, internal security. If you have private actors that have enough power to outcompete the state, what do you do? And here you're touching off matters of internal security, whether it is economically, militarily, by persuading people, because then politicians are beholden to their constituents. Like through all those things, this is why the media was like the fourth power, and this was why social media is not neutral. This is why you have billionaires acquiring social media platforms, and before newspapers, but now you have more concentration. So I think this should be thought about differently from just regular industrial regulation. Then for regular industrial regulation, I've already expressed my thoughts about piecemeal regulation and things like this. I think there's a place for industrial regulation. I'm more interested in, for instance, if we talk about climate change, I'm more interested in carbon markets. So it's like you have your target emissions as a country, and then you do a market of this, instead of trying to regulate every industry and prevent AC systems beyond some thresholds of efficiency. I'm like, no. Like let people decide where they want to use their carbon emissions.
Yeah.
So here,
create a market of it. Do you have any views of how, so obviously that leads to the point of you need international coordination on these things, because you want to do it internationally, right?
I think there are things that you can do nationally, but I think that as a country, you have a duty to your citizens. You shouldn't, sacrifice yourself for the well-being of everyone else at the cost of your citizens. I think this is a very bad thing to do. I think this goes against your duty as a country. This is why I frame it in terms of national security too. What I mean by this is that in the end, all the things that we can do this because we can do them because we're physically safe. And in the 21st century, we're physically safe because our countries protect us with their armies. And I see this as like the primary duty of a country. And this is how I think about extinction risk. It's like the primary duty to protect us against extinction risk too. And so there are a bunch of things that can be done unilaterally. So for instance, preventing the development of ASI is, I think, a thing that can be done unilaterally because you don't benefit from ASI. If you have actors that have systems that can outcompete the government, it's bad for the government. But then there is a more subtle one that is much harder that I don't think can be done unilaterally, which is regulating the precursors to ASI. For instance, compute. I don't think that as a country, for instance, it's feasible to just say, I will not build data centers on my soil. I think as it stands, without any modifications, it's basically a transfer of power, because you'll still allow AI companies on your soil. Like, this is why I say, if you don't make any change to that one, you'll still allow AI companies, but they will use data centers in other countries.
Yeah.
So you're just transferring power out of your country. And so for this type of stuff, either you must come up with very clever legislation. That's part of what we do at ControlAI. We're like, what's the most that we can do domestically without crippling countries where those laws happen? We don't want to disincentivize doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And what should be part of international coordination. And so typically, if we want to limit the amount of compute, this has to be a thing that is done internationally. Possibly there are exceptions, but as a general rule of thumb, you don't want countries to disarm unilaterally. It's the same thing, with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. There's a reason why it's a treaty and not countries doing it unilaterally. And I think the same way of AI development. So,
and one of the challenges with that, right, is the further you go in without a solution, the higher the stakes.
Yeah, there are many points of no return.
Yeah, and you have China, the US is obviously the big power dynamic a lot of people talk about. Like that, this requires an international system and international institutions that are competent and capable. Are you confident? Are you comfortable or confident in the existing institutions to pick that up, or do we need to rethink kind of our entire approach to international governance in that vein?
So there are many different opinions about international governance. I'm not too fond of the existing institutions there. I'm more fond of countries doing agreements with each other. I think countries are the correct level of resolution to think about here. I'm much more optimistic about, US doing an agreement with China, than UN passing a resolution that everyone agrees with. I'm much more optimistic about middle powers gathering together and, being a counter power to the US than, middle powers going to the UN Security Council and doing something there.
Do you think you would have felt the same way if AI had come around it wouldn't have, but in like 2005?
2005 is more on the edge. I would have felt differently, in the 60s.
Yeah.
You still had the Cold War, but you still had a bunch of other things. You still had the nuclear non-proliferation treaties and things like this. I think if we discovered nuclear weapons tomorrow, I would be much less optimistic about a non-nuclear proliferation treaty as things stand. So I think there's a lot of work that must be done there, yeah.
It's interesting you say it because like the one angle you talk about is like countries need to we need to be doing things which
deals with each other,
but deals with each other. But equally, the thing of like a lot of this is going to require international cooperation of either more than one country, obviously more than one countries, but like more than two countries just for US and China. Or the view is US and China are the only ones that really matter in this race because they just bully everyone else into compliance.
Not really, but yeah.
But if you had that, then you'd have the escape route problem, right? That if you either think that US and China are the only ones that matter because they're the ones that only have the infrastructure, only have the tools to kind of build the intelligence level you're worried about, and therefore them agreeing is the most important thing. And when anyone else tries to sprout up anything, they can like squish them down. Otherwise, the flip side of it must be the fact that we need more countries to get involved because the US and China couldn't contain them if and when that risk would arise.
I think there are two things to keep in mind. The first one is that the US and China are coordinating. Like as of right now, the US is exporting GPUs to China.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, coordinating. Yeah. In terms of trading, in terms of safety, right, or in terms of like regulation.
Yeah, sure. But what I'm saying is that it is happening. If you thought they were like in a race where they're fighting against each other on AI, the US exporting GPUs to China makes no sense.
Yeah.
So there is some coordination. You can say it's aimed at the wrong thing, to which I'd agree, but there is coordination happening. So I think it's much more a matter of convincing countries to do the right things, convincing the executives in different countries to do the right thing than, abstract arguments about is coordination possible or not. No, it constantly happens. And very often it happens on the wrong things like this. But it also happens on the right things. We're not getting World War III with armed conflicts between China and US. There are conflicts between China and US. There's a lot to say there. But it's still not World War III. So I don't think that abstract arguments are that useful. I think it's more useful to think about what is the type of agreement that we will need between countries, how much more palatable can we make it for countries, how can we convince the administration of different countries of the risks. I think if, Donald Trump tomorrow feels in his bones that he has 5 years left to live because he has 5 years timelines, I expect he makes very different choices regardless of everything else. Same thing if it's, most of the administration around Trump. Same thing if it's most of the legislature. I think they will take very different actions. I think they'll try to convince the administration and things like this. So I think there's a thing that a phenomenon. I'm not sure how to call it. Internally, in my mind, I call it terminal cynicism, where people build all those like giga-brained arguments for why it's impossible to do anything, based on abstract nonsense. It's like, oh, international coordination is impossible. Oh, good regulation is impossible. Or sometimes, oh, good growth is impossible. This is a thing that you have a lot on the left. It's like, you must do degrowth because good growth is impossible because capitalism has led to problems historically and things like this. And I think those abstract arguments that lead like to terminal cynicism are like very bad. It's just you're rejecting a bunch of possibilities on principle rather than on pragmatics. So if we are to discuss, a specific, type of thing, agreement where, and we see, can countries agree on this? Can the US and China agree on this? Can other countries bring counterbalance to the US or to China? Then I think there's a lot to say. If you look at logistics, supply chains, and things like this, you see that there are many countries that are choke points right now in various industries. We're in the 21st century with globalization. Supply chains are international, and all the different countries matter. If they did not, the US and China will be like in utter sea. They would not depend that much on all the other countries. So this is why I think getting down to the specifics and the pragmatics is much better than...
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested in, it's interesting to take angle, right? Because that's very, a lot of people will be concerned of, thinking in the UK context of how difficult it is just to get very basic things right.
Yeah.
Very difficult to get our institutions just doing the very basic, enable us to build a road or not build a £100 million bat tunnel.
So...
yeah, please.
Yeah, I think this one is the 100 mil. Do you want to go there?
always got to drop a bat tunnel in every once in a while. Keep it alive.
No, I think it's an important one. I think it's a very important one because it's so salient. But the question is, what do we mean by it's so hard? What I've seen in practice is that when someone tells me it's so hard to get, change on X, very often they meant that they had a lot of feelings about the situation and nothing changed. And I'm a human being. Human to human, I'm like, oh, I hear your feelings and I feel very sad for you. Compassion. But at the same time, I'm like, why do you expect your feelings to matter? Like they're worth nothing, to your parents, friends, to me, sure, but to the wider world, why do you expect that just because you felt very strongly about a thing, the government should listen to you? And I think that a lot of people are trapped in this. Most people by far have no political engagement whatsoever. Most people have not contacted their MP. They can, very open, especially in the UK. There are some countries where that's not the case, but in the UK specifically, you can contact your representatives. And so when someone that has never done anything like this tells me, oh, it's very hard to get change, I'm like, compassion, but very hard to take you seriously. And this is why I think it's interesting to be on the LFG podcast, because the LFG podcast is not in this mentality. And coincidentally, it has done real things. And so...
When and why do you think this mentality crept in society? And, it's probably country specific and what have you, but I guess specifically talking about the UK.
Oh, wow. Do you want?
Go. now more than ever, yeah. Now you've answered that, of course.
No. So I think there's a lot that has played into this mentality. So I think that a lot of this was done on purpose by agitators. I think a lot of people are spreading FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, become pessimistic, believe
is that internal agitators as well then?
Oh, yeah. So I think you have external agitators. We do very little on social media to prevent foreign propaganda. I think this is terrible, and this leads to predictably bad things like this, and we just do nothing. I don't know. To me, this seems like completely ludicrous. I'm like, you defend your border, you defend what goes in, you defend the information that goes in. You don't want to let anyone spread bad messages to millions of your citizens. I don't know. To me, this just seems stupid. But that's a separate one. So I think there are foreign enemies. I think there are internal enemies. I think we have many people that are using FUD to push for radical change. This is the typical demagogue, play. It's like, everything is broken. You must vote for me because I will change everything. And until you vote for me, there's nothing that can be done. And we've heard it from like literally everyone. I think my favorite example is the Brexit, because the Brexit was predicated on two things. There's the highbrow version and the lowbrow version. I'm not saying whether those two goals are good or not. I'm just saying those were the two goals. So the highbrow goal was, we'll get the UK out of the EU, and then it will be able to, get out of red tape hell. And we got the Brexit, and this did not happen. And the lowbrow version was, we'll get the UK out of the EU, and then it'll be able to control its border and get less immigration. It did not happen. Since then, we've had the highest immigration in the UK, since forever. And so those failures, from my point of view, are like completely predictable. It's like it didn't come from a good place. It didn't come from trying to actually improve our institutions. We didn't try to build better governments and things like this. I think the people that put Boris Johnson in power did not believe in Boris Johnson. Regardless of whether I think he was a good or not people to govern, a bunch of the people propping him up did not believe in that. So I think this is a very bad thing to do. If you do not believe in someone, do not put them in power. If you don't try to improve the institutions, I don't want you to govern. And like, you'll predictably make things worse, you'll predictably fail, and so on and so forth. And so I think that a bunch of, this terminal cynicism comes from people who want to take power and who are happy to spread FUD, uncertainty, doubt, pessimism, cynicism to get there internally. And I think this is just terrible. I think this is really bad.
And I mean, Boris Johnson one is an interesting one, because it's like, don't put him to power. If you were to talk to like an individual on the street who's got a choice of who do you vote for, and in 2019, I can't remember actually who was it Jeremy Corbyn, wasn't it?
It was Jeremy
Corbyn.
Corbyn.
Corbyn. So you got Jeremy Corbyn on one side, Boris Johnson on the other. You got, I think, Tim. I'm not going to name them all, but the Lib Dem leader,
Farron.
Tim Farron. That's it. You ultimately have a list of leaders, but also MPs that you're obviously voting for. Like, what can you do as an individual? What would your argument be to say, don't vote these people into power? But if you don't believe in them, don't vote them to power.
Here I was more thinking of like campaign organizers and people like this.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
If we're talking about the actual citizens, I think that once you get to the vote, most of the things have already happened.
Yeah.
It's like the same way. When you have an international summit, most of the negotiations have happened beforehand.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that as a citizen, your duty is just to come once every 4 years. I think this is an extremely reductionist version of what civics are. I think you should contact your MP about the issues that you care about. I think you should find people that care about the issues that you care about and contact your MP with them. I think you should get into whatever political party you're for and try to engage yourself in it. If you're an expert, you should brief the MPs about your topic of expertise instead of complaining that they don't have magical knowledge ex nihilo about your field of expertise. This is a thing that I hear constantly. I know a lot of experts in AI that are like, oh, it's useless to talk to MPs about AI because they know nothing about the topic. I'm like,
we haven't told them.
That's because of you. It's not the institution that is broken. You are broken. Like, you are the institution. For a lot of people, the institutions or the system is a thing that is external to them. It's like impossible to think of themselves as part of the system. But no, you are the system. Like, you must give the knowledge to your politician. If you think that they're too ignorant, give them the knowledge. If you think that they're not paying enough attention to the issue that you care about, you should contact them. If contacting them doesn't work, you should organize with other people. If organizing with other people, you all contacted them and they still ignore you, go to journalists, go to their staffers, go to other people in their political parties. There's just so much to do.
Completely. It's a personal responsibility thing, right? Like, do you internally feel that drive to actually try and change that yourself?
And I think it's fair if you don't. I think a bunch of people are selfish, and that's fair, but then don't complain. It's like, if you're like, oh, I won't do my civic duty, I don't care, blah, blah, then don't complain. Like, you have no rights. Just keep quiet and let the adults actually do the things.
I think there's a lot that could be done by the other side as well to improve the coordination and opportunities for coordination. Like the effect you bring up of just emailing MPs, it's totally legitimate. but it's also like a crazy system that the best communication method we have is to spam an inbox, which is already overloaded. And like the method for communication and coordination between MPs and the state and externals is just like, that's really broken, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say broken. I think email is like quite fine, actually. I think there are a lot of improvements that we can do, but think about an email. It takes you like 5 minutes. With ControlAI, we've built tools such that it takes you like literally 30 seconds. We have templates and so on.
But I guess
on
on the flip side of like the staff on the other side, they basically almost have a full-time staff member who like has to now go through emails.
So that's not what we found. What we found is that a bunch of representatives, a couple of MPs have actually supported our campaign literally because people contacted them. They send us an email, hey, I've received...
but once you get like the critical mass and like once you get the attention in, but there's a lot of like right now the system is, as you say, emailing in, and a good way of doing that as well is to have a number of emails so that it flags to them as like this is an important topic.
Yeah, but I think this is like this is the institution working. Like a single individual should not be able to turn politicians.
No, but
like this is democracy. It's not.
If I'm an expert who's like I'd like to offer my time and expertise to my MP, then you've got to email this inbox, which is flooded with lots of like.
So I think there's a bunch of things that you can do to make it better. Gather 5 of your friends, create a nonprofit, and then you become chief of the name of the nonprofit. You have 5 faces on the website.
Leverage authority.
Yeah. No, but it sounds stupid. But most people don't go to that length, and then politicians will already pay more attention to you. It's just like 6 people. It's still not very democratic. I still don't think that's ideal, but it already works. If you're an expert, you should also, gather a couple of friends, family, acquaintances, friends of friends, other experts. And I don't know, if you're like 50, that's already more than what almost anyone does in any constituency. Yeah. So like the floor is like, how do you call it? Yeah, the floor is like so low. And this is why I'm saying, I think there are a lot of things that you can do to improve the system. Like fundamentally, we're using institutions that are like 250 years old. Like, voting every 4 years because of constraints that we had 250 years old, like 50 years ago. We don't have those constraints anymore. We have the internet. We have AI. There's so much more that we can do. But my point is that even those like super old systems we haven't saturated and people are still can be bothered to send email. Like we're very far from saturation. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot that can be done like literally everywhere. I think the government can do a lot. I think institutionally we can do a lot. I think we can build a lot of tools doing this. I think people can do more. You're doing this. I just think that there are so many low-hanging fruits. I think terminal cynicism is just not warranted. Like if you want to do things, there are things to do. And if you don't know what are these things, go to LFG, go to ControlAI, like send me an email. ga@controlai.com. Feel free.
You're going to get spam now.
It's okay. It's okay.
Then you'll know what the staffer feels like in the MP's office.
Yeah, but great. Like if I get to that point, like so great. Like, do you truly think this? Like a month from now, do I get too much spam because of people who want to do things? Like in your heart, you know that it's not gonna happen. That's what I mean. It's like in your heart, you already have the expectation that most people won't bother.
Yeah. Oh, now you've set up a challenge. Interesting. Okay. Look, we got to end, but we'll end on 2 quick fire questions. One to flip a lot of what you've been talking about, and we want to focus in on like what do you feel most pessimistic about in terms of the future, and then end on what you feel most optimistic about.
I think it's basically the same question. The question is, what is the highest point of leverage?
This is the way someone's twisted we haven't twisted my question like this before. I'll go for it. I'll let you twist it.
So from a point of view, it's mostly... So I will say the most pessimistic one is something like, in the current cultural landscape, I think people are too cynical for their own good. And so they will just not act. And I think we get to a point of no return where even if people act, it's too late. Everything is already captured by like big AI corporations, that have too much power over governments, that have too much power over the economy and the livelihood of people because they've automated everything, or that have already achieved military dominance. And when I say big corporations, I don't mean CEOs. It may be AIs that are driving those big corporations. It may already be outside of human control. So the pessimistic side is basically, do we do something collectively before we can't anymore? And right now it feels like in the cultural landscape, people can be bothered or too pessimistic or too cynical. They're like, oh, you can't do anything. It's like either growth is impossible, institutional change is impossible, growth is possible, but it will always be bad. Something like this. And the optimism is like the flip side of this, is that people are so cynical that there are just like $100 bills lying on the ground everywhere. It's just there's so much that can be done, and there's so little that is needed, to flip the balance. It's like it's crazy. We could have talked, about a lot of failures of big tech. They have wrecked, put a wrecking ball in our institutions quite a lot. A lot of the problems that we talk about are downstream of social media, where we just gave up on the fourth power, the fourth estate, and so on and so forth. And we're like, let's see what happens if we let AIs and big tech control it. We say it's not good. Instead of doing institutional design with just roll a die. But here, I think that if we actually try to do things, whether it is institutional design, whether it is civic engagement, whether it is, expert engagement, I think there's just so much to do. Especially in 2025, we have the internet, we have computers, we have educated people, we have AI. There's just infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
So,
Lots of scope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gabe, for coming on.
Thank you. It was really
pleasure.
fascinating.
If you want to continue the conversation, then now have your email address.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on.
Cheers.
Cheers.